Okay, today we're going to talk about the heart and the blood vessels. You'll notice that there's actually three videos in the circulatory unit. The first one is this one, heart and blood vessels. The next one will be due in a couple days. It's going to talk about the blood and its components. And finally, you have the heart and exercise. But right now we're going to focus on the heart and the circulatory system and the blood vessels. What's the purpose of the heart? Well, the heart has two main purposes. The first purpose is to pump blood throughout your body. It turns out every cell in your body actually produces waste, and that waste is carbon dioxide or CO2. And every cell in your body really needs oxygen in order to survive and be able to carry out its functions. So the first purpose of the heart is to act like a giant pump and pump basically blood throughout all the organs and all the cells, near all the cells in your body. By doing that, the blood ends up picking up the waste, the CO2, and carrying it away from the cells, and it delivers oxygen to the cells so that they can actually survive and function. So the first role of the heart is blood flow, carrying the blood throughout the body, pumping it throughout the body so that waste can be carried away from cells and oxygen can be delivered to cells. The second purpose of the heart actually has to do with the lungs, and it's called pulmonary flow. Pulmonary is a fancy science term for the lungs. Okay? And pulmonary flow means that the heart basically takes the blood and it sends it out to your lungs. The reason why it does this is because when the blood picks up all that waste, that CO2 from your cells, you have to have a way to get rid of that waste, to get rid of that carbon dioxide. And so what happens is your heart pumps that blood that has all that carbon dioxide in it out to your lungs, and then you breathe that carbon dioxide out. Okay? Then you breathe in oxygen, and your heart ends up pulling, basically taking that oxygenated blood back into it and pumping it out to the rest of your body. So the second purpose of the heart is pulmonary flow. It's to exchange carbon dioxide for oxygen by sending the carbon dioxide filled blood out to your lungs and then bringing in the oxygen filled blood back into the heart and throughout the body. So, what does the circulatory system look like and how does it work? Well, this is a big loop. So, the circulatory system is one giant loop. Okay? So, you can basically start anywhere in the system and work your way around because it's like a giant circle. But I started at number 1 here. The first thing that happens in the circulatory system is that all this blood that's filled with carbon dioxide, it's represented by the blue here, it's the veins. All that blood with the carbon dioxide in it ends up going out from the heart to your lungs. Okay. Then you breathe that carbon dioxide out and you breathe in oxygen. Okay. That oxygen goes into the blood, okay, inside your lungs, inside the capillaries in your lungs, and then goes into your artery and travels back into your heart. Sorry, into your vein and travels back into your heart. Then that oxygenated blood, once it's in your heart, gets pumped through your aorta and it gets pumped out through the other arteries in your body, throughout the rest of your body, and out to your capillaries. Then all your cells throughout your body and throughout your organs get that oxygen from that blood, and they release their carbon dioxide into that blood. And step 7, that blood that's now filled with carbon dioxide ends up traveling back up to your heart, where it gets pushed back out to your lungs again, and the whole process starts over. Basically, step 9 says repeat over and over again until you die or until death, because it continues to go until you basically pass away. So again, blood comes from your heart that's filled with carbon dioxide out to your lungs. You breathe that carbon dioxide out. You breathe in oxygen. That new oxygenated blood goes back into your heart. Your heart pumps that blood back out through your whole body, gives the oxygen out to your whole body. It picks up waste or carbon dioxide from the rest of your body and then takes that waste, that carbon dioxide, back up to your heart, pumps it back out to your lungs again, and the whole process starts over. It's one giant circle. That's basically how your circulatory system works. So, real quick, what are the parts of the circulatory system? Well, we've got the heart. The heart contains something called the pulmonary veins. These carry blood with CO2 or carbon dioxide into your lungs. You have your pulmonary arteries. These carry the oxygen from your lungs back into your heart. You have your aorta. Your aorta is the largest artery in your body, and it actually carries all the blood with the oxygen in it out, and it disperses it out to other arteries, which then carry it out throughout the rest of your body. So the aorta is one gigantic artery coming out of your heart, and from there, the blood travels out to smaller arteries, and it travels throughout your whole body. You have your anterior vena cava. That's sometimes called also your superior vena cava. This is the vein that comes into the top of your heart and brings deoxygenated blood or blood with carbon dioxide into the top of your heart. Then you have the posterior vena cava. This is the vein that comes in from from underneath or from the bottom into your heart and brings basically blood with CO2 into it in your heart. Inside of your heart, you have valves, and these valves keep the blood from flowing in the wrong direction. They keep it from going backward. Okay. Inside your heart, too, your heart also is made up of 4 different chambers or small little areas. The top 2 areas are called the atrium. They are the upper chambers of your heart. The bottom 2 areas are called the ventricles. They are the lower chambers of your heart. And then finally, you have coronary arteries and coronary veins. These actually provide oxygen and carry away carbon dioxide from your actual heart itself. Because your heart is a muscle, and your heart has cells in it, and those cells need oxygen to survive, and those cells need to basically get rid of their waste, their carbon dioxide. So the coronary arteries and veins actually carry the blood to your heart so it can function, and they carry the carbon dioxide away from your heart so that it can be gotten rid of. The last things in your circulatory system that you need to know about, and guys, there's more stuff, and as you go farther into high school and college, you'll get deeper and deeper into this, but the last thing that we need to know is that we have arteries, veins, and capillaries. Your arteries carry blood away from your heart, and it's usually blood that contains oxygen, but there is an exception, and I'll tell you about the exception in a few minutes. So again, arteries carry blood away from the heart. You can think of A for artery and A from away from the heart. They are made of an inner strong muscular layer because they have to be able to handle a lot of pressure because that blood is pumping pretty hard and pretty fast out from your heart and out to the rest of your body. And then they have an elastic outer part or an outer covering that makes them more flexible so that they can handle all of that pressure. They, again, withstand enormous pressure. If you think about it, your heart has to pump that oxygenated blood out of itself and throughout your entire body. It has to pump that blood all the way down to your toes, and it has to pump with enough force that it can actually pump blood back up. So pump enough blood down hard enough and fast enough with enough pressure that the blood will actually come back up your body through your veins and get back to your heart. So those arteries need to be very strong and they need to be very flexible. And so they're built with a strong muscular layer to make them strong and with an outer elastic layer to make them very flexible so they can do that. When you feel your pulse, you're actually feeling the blood traveling through your arteries. Now your veins carry blood back to your heart. And again, this is usually blood that's deoxygenated. When we say the blood is deoxygenated, we mean it has carbon dioxide in it, not oxygen. Okay? So the veins carry blood back to your heart, and again, usually it's blood that contains a whole bunch of carbon dioxide. There is an exception, and we'll talk about it in a second, but you can think of the veins as carrying blood back to your heart. They don't have to be quite as strong as your arteries because they don't have to withstand as much pressure. Because if you think about it, the blood's coming back to your heart, so there's not as much pressure pushing on it. And so they're made of a more fibrous tissue and they have an outer lining. Again, you don't have as much pressure on your veins because they're at this back end of the process. Your heart, when it first pumps and puts all that pressure out, pushes all that blood with a lot of pressure through the arteries. By the time it gets to the veins, there's much less pressure pushing it back up. And finally, it contains valves. Your veins contain valves in them to keep blood from moving backward. Because if you think about it, the blood goes all the way down to your toes with all that oxygen in it so that your toes can function and all those cells in your little toe can wiggle and function. And then all that blood with all the carbon dioxide in it has to go all the way from your toes, all the way back up to your heart. And the way that your body keeps that blood from falling back down because of gravity is that it has valves inside of your veins that help keep the blood from moving backward. And finally, you have capillaries. Capillaries are tiny little blood cells that branch off from your arteries. So you have your giant aorta artery, and it branches off into smaller arteries, and those arteries branch off into smaller arteries until finally you get to the actual organs inside of your body. And when you get to that point, those arteries branch off into these itty bitty little capillaries. These capillaries are only 1 cell thick. So they're extremely, extremely small. And that's where actually all the gases are exchanged, is in the capillaries. In this 1 cell thick membrane in the capillaries, all of the oxygen is released into your organs, into the cells, so that they can function. And all the carbon dioxide, it comes back into the capillaries from your organs. So they're very tiny, but very important. This is a picture of your heart, and here's how your heart works. Basically, let's start with the blood coming back from your body. So your cells release all this carbon dioxide into the blood, and that blood comes back up to your heart. When it comes back up to your heart, if it's coming from the bottom part of your body or from like your chest or stomach or from like your heart down, it'll end up coming up through this posterior vena cava down here. If it's coming from your brain or your upper torso, it'll end up coming through this anterior vena cava. Guys, this also sometimes you should make a note is called superior vena cava. Okay? So the blood with carbon dioxide in it, that's why it's colored blue, comes in through these two vena cava and comes into this right atrium. This is the top chamber of your heart. The blood is then pumped through this valve, this ventricular valve, into your ventricle. Now, what are these valves for? These valves they open and shut, and the reason why they shut is to make sure that the blood doesn't travel backward. Okay? So basically, when the blood comes into this atrium, this right atrium, this atrioventricular valve will open. This valve up here, your semilunar valve, will close. And the blood will travel down into your right ventricle. Then this valve that just opened, the atrioventricular valve, will close. This other valve, the semilunar valve, will open, and the blood will get pushed or pumped up into your pulmonary artery right here. Now, guys, these valves basically open and shut, open and shut, open and shut, but they do it in order. So this one goes first, and then this one, 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 and this one. You get the idea. That's actually what makes the heartbeat sound when you listen to somebody's heartbeat. When you hear somebody's heartbeat go lub-dub, 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 that sound is actually made from these valves opening and closing in order. So one will open and the other one will close, and the other one will open and the other one will close. And that makes the lub-dub sound. Now the blood with all the carbon dioxide in it gets pushed up into this pulmonary artery. And you might say, wait a minute, Sullivan, you said arteries contain blood with oxygen in them. Well, yes, but remember, arteries actually carry blood away from the heart. And so this is the exception I was talking about on the previous slide. This artery actually contains deoxygenated blood. It's carrying that blood away from the heart, and it carries it out to your right and your left lungs, which are over here on the sides. They're not in the picture, but they would be on the sides of your heart. So out to the left lung, out to the right lung. Then the carbon dioxide is breathed out, the oxygen is breathed in and goes into the blood, and that blood comes back over here into the heart through these pulmonary veins. Again, this is the exception. Remember, we said veins carry blood into the heart, but usually it's this blood over here that has no oxygen in it. It's deoxygenated. In this case, the blood actually has oxygen in it because it's coming from the lungs. So it comes into these pulmonary veins on the sides. There's one set here and one set here. And it goes into your left atrium. Okay. Then this valve opens, this ventricular valve opens. This one up here shuts. And the blood gets pushed down into your left ventricle. From your left ventricle, then, this valve up here, the atrioventricular valve, shuts. this other valve, the semilunar valve, opens and the blood gets pushed up into your aorta. And this giant artery right here is your aorta. Again, it's the biggest artery in your body. If it ruptures, you literally have a matter of minutes before you bleed to death. Probably like 1 to 2 minutes or 2 to 3 minutes. It's not a very long period of time at all. It is a gigantic organ, or gigantic, excuse me, artery. And then from this artery, the blood gets pumped out into multiple other arteries that then travel throughout your entire body and deliver the oxygen to your body. Then once the oxygen in your body gets delivered, and then the carbon dioxide gets picked up from the cells, again, the blood comes back up through these vena cava, and the whole process starts over again. Your heart is one of the hardest working organs in your body. In fact, it is the hardest working muscle in your body. And it actually pumps from the time you're born until the time you die, about 80 beats per minute, every hour, every minute, every hour, every day for your entire life. In some cases, it pumps even faster when you're exercising or working out, or if you're frightened, it'll pump even faster. But basically, this is one of the hardest working muscles. It's one giant muscle in your body, and it pumps blood throughout. So again, just to recap, carbon dioxide filled blood comes in through the vena cava into the right atrium, goes down through the valve into the right ventricle, goes up through the valve into the pulmonary artery, goes out to the lungs. The carbon dioxide gets breathed out. The oxygen gets breathed in. The oxygenated blood comes back in through these pulmonary veins into the right atrium, down through the valve, into the left atrium, into the left atrium, down through the valve, into the left ventricle, up through the valve, into your aorta, and then gets pushed out to all of your arteries and sent throughout your whole body. And the whole process starts over again. So I'm showing you this picture because I want to show you one other thing. First of all, this picture here was a cutaway of the heart. So if we cut the heart in half and looked inside, this is kind of what it would look like. Okay? This picture is actually what the heart looks like when it's whole, when it's solid and it's not cut in half. And what I wanted to show you here is, again, you've got your vena cava, you've got your aorta, you've got your heart muscle. Up here would be the atrium. Down here would be your two ventricles. But if you look on the outside here, you've got these coronary arteries and coronary veins. Your heart is a muscle and it's made out of cells. And just like all the other organs in your body, it needs oxygen in order to survive, and it releases carbon dioxide as waste. And so these arteries running along the outside of the heart and these veins running along the outside of the heart actually provide oxygen and take away carbon dioxide from the cells that are in the heart. Now, if one of these arteries gets clogged, okay, and that can happen through eating a poor diet. What happens is if you eat a diet that's high in fat or high in cholesterol, that cholesterol or that fat will end up, basically the cholesterol will end up building up inside of these arteries, and they'll block the road. Okay, we call it plaque. They build up this plaque inside the arteries, and they end up blocking the artery. And eventually the artery gets blocked so much that the blood can't get through anymore. So when that happens on these arteries, the heart can no longer get oxygen from that artery because the artery's blocked. And basically then the heart ends up not being able to work properly because it doesn't have enough oxygen, and the person ends up having a heart attack. So if you've heard of people having a heart attack, what happens is these arteries get blocked with plaque. The plaque is caused by cholesterol and eating fatty foods, and they get blocked to the point where the blood can't go through anymore, or not as much blood can go through anymore, and then the heart can't get oxygen, and the heart seizes up, and you have a heart attack. So that's how heart attacks occur. But these are the coronary arteries and coronary veins.